Hey everybody, welcome to Landscape Rescue. I'm Stuart Moore, and on today's episode, we're gonna talk about Japanese maples. The coral bark Japanese maple. We haven't seen very many of these floating around, and that's what these big garden centers, the small mom and pop places, the places like that, you're going to be able to get something like a coral bark Japanese maple there, where they might have them at Lowe's and it's going to fly out the door, or it's going to sit there and die because they have them priced too high. Whatever the case may be, you're not going to see them. I spend a lot of time in garden centers all over my city, all over the Springfield metro area. I spend time in garden centers, and I don't see some of the stuff that I'm going to show you today. If you can look, this has a coral colored bark. When it snows, this will stop traffic. Give this guy morning sun shielded from the hot afternoon. Full morning sun all the way until some point in the afternoon, and give him a little break. 5 gallon is probably going to be somewhere around $150. That's what these are. These are coral bark Japanese maples. They're relatively common in the privately owned garden center space. You're getting to the point where they're going to be very desirable though. When they start changing, I sell a lot of them when they drop their leaves or they start changing, because they have amazing fall color. Beautiful fall color, especially against that coral colored bark. It takes some time. The temperature's got to be right. If you look at this one here, just now starting to change to red, but if you go further up the stem, it's kind of a greenish color. Sometimes you'll see that red growth earlier on in the year. It'll turn green. Coral bark Japanese maple is a good maple to have in the landscape. It's got great fall color, and it's got that red bark, so you're getting that winter interest. So it doesn't have to be evergreen to give you winter interest, because I promise you, when it snows and you've got a coral bark, you'll notice that will be your favorite tree in the winter. Acer palmatum. So a lot of times you'll see something on a tag that says Acer palmatum Bloodgood. Acer palmatum is the base, right? So this is the original. This is the one that hasn't been dissected and moved around and bred for any particular quality. What you see is what you get. But this is actually a pretty good deal. These look like they're in a 30-gallon pot. Let me just double check real quick on a tag. 25. So it's a 25-gallon pot. Expect this to get, I mean, let's look how big these things are. They're so big, we can't put them any further back in the greenhouse because they're touching the top of the greenhouse. For $275, expect beautiful fall color out of them. That's what you're bringing to the table. They're only probably, I would say, gonna get about 20 feet tall, if that. But be careful when you're planting them next to your house. Not because I believe that roots have a self-tapping screw that's going to dig into your foundation. I could go on and on about that misnomer. I want it to be able to reach its full potential. So what I would do is I would go out 10 feet and then put my, right off of the corner, right? So if you're going to have this in your front yard in a bed, it would be nice if it was a little bit further out. And I know you guys have probably seen a Bloodgood Japanese maple planted too close to the house, and it's reaching for light, and they just end up looking silly. But having 2 Japanese maples on either side framing out your house that are like reaching for light and way too big for the house, they're trying to clear the soffit, they've been pruned weird because it was just the wrong plant for the wrong place. So I would pull it out to where I had at least 7 feet before, so it could clear the soffit and it could get direct sunlight right above it. And sometimes that helps control the reaching. That's one problem I see with people planting a palmatum style, right? So when I say palmatum style, this is what I'm talking about. Acer palmatum style.
Remember, if you shake it more than twice, you're playing with it.
Japanese maple too close to the house. I don't like it when they dissect them too close to the house either, because they end up pruning them and they just look like goofy little mushrooms, right? Which I guess if you're creating kind of a whimsical landscape. But it's a little expensive to not let it do what it wants to do. So $275 it's a really good deal for something this large, but I would reserve, I like to put these in like a berm if I'm doing something I've got a large oak tree or something that kind of building up in that area, or a side of the house that's just gonna get that morning sun, and then around 2 o'clock it's shaded. That would be a good place for something like this too. Again, I have seen them in full sun, but I've also seen ones in full sun that weren't very tall and weren't very old that had borers. And remember, when we've talked about borers in the past, borers see stressed out plants. And a lot of times that's because they're not in the right place. So they get stressed out, they get some borers, and then if the borers don't take them out, then they're kind of struggling from that point on, and they end up looking like the tree of Gondor to me. So let's just plant the right plant for the right place. And the good place to talk about that is with Japanese maples, because I see that very often. Japanese maples are kind of planted in a wrong place. I'm not gonna say they're overplanted, because tell your own story, right? Do whatever you wanna do with your part of the earth within reason. Acer palmatum, that's the beginning of things like Bloodgoods and that palmatum style. So another Japanese maple that I really like, and I'm gonna try to work in some purple varieties, because I have a tendency to lean towards the green varieties for the fall color. I really like the full moon maple. And the full moon maple has the most exquisite fall color. It's gorgeous. I love the full moon maple. It's one of my favorite maples, and it does have a really cool leaf. So it's not like the normal Japanese maple leaf.
I'm turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese, I really think so.
And then when it starts to change into its fall color, absolutely stunning, especially because it's got this lime green chartreuse colored, shows up very well when that afternoon starts to get shaded in the afternoon, and there it is. There you see that it's almost like a beacon. So it's a cool way to brighten up some shady areas. As long as you can get enough sun to it to where we're going to get some good sugar development, we're also going to get good fall color, right? So when I say, let's give it enough sunlight, but we want it out of the hot afternoon sun. The full moon maple, look it up. I mean, if you're thinking about a Japanese maple, this might be a way to go. Price is a direct representation of how popular it is. So this $300. What was it, $280? I'm so dumb.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb, for real.
$275. $300, $275. See, that's the difference. Not as popular, not purple, right? Which is what everybody wants. I will tell somebody about how great these are, and they will say, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. Well, do you have it in purple? I don't. They don't make a full moon maple in purple. Or maybe they do. I don't know. All right, that's the full moon maple. That's a good one, but it gets big. Again, don't be slamming this up against your foundation. It's not gonna look kooky cool like if you did something neat with a Crimson Queen, like something relatively deliberate that looks pretty neat. It's just gonna look dumb. I don't know, but tell your story. I mean, if you got a dumb landscape, plant a Japanese maple too close to your house. It'll accentuate the dumbness. To add even more confusion to the whole Japanese maple conversation, this is a palmatum. So just like it's an Acer palmatum, just like this big boy here, but it's Acer palmatum Ryusen. This is a palmatum that has a weeping habit to it, right? So it looks like a dissectum style, but it's a palmatum, has that palmatum leaf. There you go, dissectum style leaf. The new growth is a very, very bright green that ages to this dark green color, and then beautiful fall color. as all Japanese maples. I don't think there's one Japanese maple that I don't like the fall color on. These also can handle more sun. So the green leafed Japanese maples can typically handle a little bit more sun, but expect some leaf scorch at the top. If you can tell, these have done a lot better than, say, the full moon maple, right? With no shade tarp on this, they got that July and August, I think, is when they were just out in full sun. And you can tell, you know, how these just didn't handle it as well as Ryusen. Ryu means dragon, and then sun, obviously like sun, like your little boy. So it's dragon sun, or son of the dragon.
Nagasaki, Okinawa, Hokkaido, Yokohama
is what this means. $280, right? $280, and they're in a 30-gallon pot, and then these here are in a 15-gallon pot, $230. $280, $230. Now this one has some new growth, so that will show you this cool chartreuse color green, limey green foliage that it gets when it first leaves out. Here's another one that we see a lot of here in the Midwest, is the Tomukiyama. This is an all purple variety. I think it's a little prettier. It's a more of a purple variety. When you have them in full shade, they turn green. So you want to give them morning sun, shielded from the hot afternoon. A lot of times when you're shopping for a Japanese maple, a lot of times they're sold to the nursery or sold to the garden center based on the pot size, right? So based on the size of the pot, or based on the head size. So how wide is the head, right? Usually in inches. Okay, so this is a 30-inch head. So that's how it was sold to us, 30-inch head. This Tomukiyama, $250. So this Japanese maple is $250 because it has such a wide head. It's a little taller. It wasn't sold to us by its pot size. It was sold to us by its head size. Sometimes if they're balled and burlapped, you'll see that. Or it'll be sold to you as like the more palmatum style, the more upright Japanese maples, a lot of times will be sold by the height or by the pot size. So keep that in mind when you're shopping. Compare apples to apples. All right, so if you find something that's a 10-gallon that has a huge head on it, but they sold it as a 10-gallon, versus one that's maybe balled and burlapped, that's a little older, that has a huge head on it, compare apples to apples, especially when you're shopping for a good deal. That's going to be really important. Tomukiyama is a very pretty Japanese maple if you want a purple leaf Japanese maple. This is a varieties Japanese maple. We'll take a look at that guy right there. That one right there. 36-inch tall, high graft. So they grafted it higher on the graft, right? So they applied that scion higher up on the graft, and that is kind of a desirable trait when it comes to Japanese maples. I like them a little high, and I also like them, I like the green variety of Japanese maple for no other reason than it changes 3 times for me. The new growth is usually a different color. Then you have the green growth comes on in the hotter parts of the summer after the spring is over, maybe late spring, early summer. That's when the leaves are going to mature and they get a different color to them. And then in the fall, you get a different fall color, right? So I get some more dynamics. It's important when you're landscaping your yard to give yourself something to be excited about. Every single season needs to excite you, okay? So that's where daffodils come into play. That's where sunflowers and butterfly bush, right? That's where evergreens come into play, or grasses, or something that's going to give you some winter interest, even though you're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time frolicking in your front yard when it's 8 degrees. But I digress. This guy right here is a varieties. This one was sold to us based on its head and its graft height, because it takes longer to grow what they're grafting onto, so it becomes more expensive. So this varieties, because it's green, I'm going to show you this. Here's another reason I really like green ones. Because it's green, $300. Very tall graft on it, very wide head. This Japanese maple, in half of the pot, $250. So for $50 extra, you can get this bad boy. That's the difference. That's the difference between a purple and a green. Vendors will run out of these. Like garden centers can't even get them because all of them have been sold, right? It's not something you can just flip a switch, turn the factory floor on, and it cranks out a bunch of Japanese maple. That's not how it works. They grow a certain amount, they're grafting a certain amount. When they're ready, they go to sell them. If they're not ready, they won't sell them to you. Here's another Tomukiyama. Look at this guy. Look at this thing. That thing is enormous. Every day of the week, that's worth it. That is a Tomukiyama, so it's a dissectum style cut leaf Japanese maple. You'll hear them called that. They don't grow as fast. They're very slow growing. So if you're comparing that to a palmatum style Japanese maple, which let me show you what those look like this one here, this is a Bloodgood Japanese maple. You can see the difference. These grow a lot faster. I've got some dead in here that I haven't gotten rid of, but you can tell very quickly how the twigs look that this is not healthy, viable tissue. And you'll see right where it starts to callus off if you're paying attention to this. And if you spend this much money on a Japanese maple, or a Japanese maple in general, because they're not Black-Eyed Susan prices, guys, you're gonna pay really close attention to it, or at least I hope you will. And if you don't, I wish I had yo kind of money. So see that twig? Looks nothing like a healthy twig, right? And I use the term twig loosely. The definition of a twig is the current year's growth. If you look at the current year's growth here, it's almost a purple color. So if you look at that, you can definitely tell when something's not happy. So if you start trimming on this, trim on it to control the character, to tell your story, right? What story do you want the Japanese maple to tell? Do not prune it to keep it a certain size. Move it, okay? Wait until it goes dormant and move it, because you probably didn't read the tag, right? And you didn't realize that these things can get 8 to 12 feet tall, and you put it next to the house. Move it out, expand your bed, let it be a Japanese maple. It's silly. If you want something small in a small space, get the right Japanese maple for the right place. Get one of these guys. Look at this guy. This Japanese maple only gets 3 feet tall. That's the max. That's where it's gonna get. 36 inches tall. That's it. And if that's what you want, get this one. This one is called Lima Gold. So the Lima Gold is gonna be $150. It's $150, it's already reached maturity. I'm pretty sure that if we plant this, it's maybe got another 6 inches to a foot before it's full size. But it's green, so it's a little less expensive because it's green. But there's so many really cool Japanese maples, and there's all different shapes and sizes. H-I-M-E, Hemi? Hey man, that thing got a Hemi in it?
That thing got a Hemi?
You're about to find out.
H-I-M-E Shoju, S-H-O-J-O. So don't make that mistake. Read the tags, get the right Japanese maple for the right place. I feel like I've spent a lot of time on Japanese maples, but we've had some comments in the Facebook group where people are wanting to talk about Japanese maples. So let's have a conversation. I've talked to a couple people in Messenger about Japanese maples and that sort of thing, because I'm here as a resource. I want to be a resource to you guys. So this is a Crimson Queen Japanese maple. This is the Crimson Queen right here. And it has these big, long branches, and they've let them go for a reason. Like, see, this thing is hanging all the way down to the ground. This is cool. This is cool. When I want a Japanese maple, this is my favorite Japanese maple out of any of them that is in here, because it has this weird, kooky character. And that's what I look for when I look for a Japanese maple, when I look for a dissectum style Japanese maple, like a Crimson Queen, like a Tomukiyama. I look for something kooky, a conversation piece, something that's gonna make people slow down and take a look. Now, I don't landscape for other people. Well, I do. When I'm designing a landscape for a particular person, that's who I'm designing the landscape for. I'm not designing it for the people that are driving in front of their house. okay? We all like that. That's fun to watch people get into fender benders in front of the house because your black-eyed Susans are blooming their faces off. That's as long as nobody gets hurt. Put that caveat in there. What I'm wanting is this branch, and that's why I say let Japanese maples be Japanese maples, and I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed. If you give this thing the right start, and you water it, and you take care of it, and you engage in some horticultural husbandry, you will be impressed with your Japanese maple. It will impress you. Now, when I do trim these, I'm trimming out cross branches. I don't necessarily want those branches shooting across other branches, right? So in the feng shui style of landscaping, you want to make sure that the branches aren't 6 inches within 6 inches of each other. You want to make sure you're getting a broad, very symmetrical, very pretty looking tree. Sometimes I like to deviate from the symmetry and get some crazy cool branches out of something like this. Now, I would most likely, if this was mine, which I would love for it to be, but the utility company has got me on this plan where the amount of power I use, then I have to pay them for that. And so then I can't do that. So I can't do this. I would probably put a bamboo stake or something in the ground so I could lift this up a little bit so I could get some height and I could get this branch to do some really kooky stuff. Most likely that's what I would do, because I got another really big branch right here. I would want it to do something neat also. So that asymmetrical, you know, something just neat. It will stabilize itself to where that's not going to cause a balance issue, as far as when I say balance, right? But it would purposefully cause a balance issue with the eye. That would be something that would accentuate this Japanese maple because it would be off a little bit, right? It would be more leaning to the left. You've got these big, giant branches coming out. Now picture them this big around, you know, picture that 15 years later where it's this big around and it's 10 feet out and you have this huge canopy of those dissectum leaves that are purple. Bards would write songs about it in taverns. That's how beautiful your Japanese maple would look. People would take pictures of it and put it in a calendar, okay? Not to mention you get to see it every single day, where if it was in a calendar, people could only see it for 1 month. Okay, so we're right here on Campbell Street, pretty busy place, so it's gonna get a little loud, but this is a varieties. And if you had I mean, it's big. So that's a varieties Japanese maple, but it's bald and burlapped. So being that it's bald and burlapped, it's sold as its height. So it's sold as a 4-footer, not by its crown or its graft height. I know it's confusing, it confuses me too, but you only have to be exposed to it for a little while before you actually kind of figure it all out. So that's the varieties like we went in there. Guy right here, this bald and burlap 4-footer, so in the ground it's gonna be 4 foot. That's how they're gonna measure it. They don't measure it, you know, sitting on the ball. From the top of the ball to the top of the tree, that's how this one's gonna be measured, and this one is $450. So $450 for that guy right there. If that was a Crimson Queen or Tomukiyama, that thing would probably be $800, would wholesale probably somewhere around $800. So that shows you the difference in how desirable they are to certain people. The vast majority of people want a purple leafed one, and so they end up having these available, and we get to reap the benefits because we really know that that Japanese maple is going to show up to the party in the fall, and it's going to accentuate our landscape. We're going to save about $300 and kind of work around the fact that it's not purple. It is what it is. So this big old guy right here, you see that? This big guy right here is in a 25-gallon pot. It's a Acer Palmatum Bloodgood. You can just walk into a place and say, if you really like this one that I'm showing you, you can walk right in and say, hey, y'all got any Bloodgoods? And they're gonna know what you're talking about. Bloodgood Japanese maple right here, $280 in a 25-gallon. Now, palmatums are typically grow faster, so they're less expensive. They grow upright. I don't know, they turn beautiful purple throughout the year, and their fall color is some semblance of reddish or purple, depends on the variety. Pretty desirable tree, and you can get them in all different shapes and sizes. I have seen Bloodgoods at Lowe's before, kind of is what it is. But you can start small, or if you want more instant gratification, you can get a big one. It's just gonna cost you more money. And the moment you have all been waiting for, the Shichigarshira. This is the Shichigarshira. Also the lion's head, lion's mane, Japanese maple. Beautiful, very dense, packed foliage. And the leaves are just tiny. Look how itsy bitsy that leaf is. It's like a mini palmatum style leaf. It's just a cool tree. Yeah, we have hard water, so this is having a little bit of a dusty appearance to it. Plus it's right by the road, so when it does get watered, all the dust just kind of sticks to it. The Shichigarshira or lion's head maple, absolutely stunning. I mean, it's worth a look. They're very cool. Here's another coral bark Japanese maple. Look how beautiful this one is. It's in a 15-gallon pot, $300. So you can take a look. When I see Japanese maples at Lowe's, at the big box stores, I get very, very excited because sometimes they get them super cheap because of their economy of scale, and they put them on sale. Do you see why I get excited? I get a little giddy, I get a little crazy. Sometimes I'll pass out. Then like there's Lowe's employees like smacking my cheeks. Are you okay, sir? Are you okay? I'm like, oh yeah, I had this crazy dream that these Japanese maples were only $50. And they're like, they are $50. And then I pass out again. Those are things that happen to me. That's what happens when you're a plant person. Thank you very much for letting me talk to you about plants. My name's Stuart Moore. Bye guys.